I'm going to start writing the code based on this outline we have here. So, okay. So the first thing is going to be texture loading. And then we are going to use that texture to sample color using the shader, right? Okay. So this is our assignment 2, if you remember that. So we had this hammer. I made this simplified. I removed the handle of the hammer and reshaped the cube to its original state. It's not squeezed anymore. I also removed the animation. So let me take a look at the code and I will show you. Okay. So we had this animation here, the global rotation. I removed that just to make things easier to see. Now we have this animation. So this is the same thing, right? But I'm going to stop the animation and I'm going to apply the texture. So things are easier to understand with the code. Okay. So what I'm going to do here, I'm going to also remove the cube for now because, you know, it's the same concept, right? We saw cube is just another object. So what we did was we created multiple cubes in the assignment 2 lab. I removed one of the cube. Now I have one cube and one triangle. So I'm not pushing the cube to the shapes, the global array I had for objects, and I'm just going to have the triangle on the screen where I'm going to change the color of the triangle, or I'm going to add the texture on the triangle. So let me also disable the rotations. Oh, this is fine. I guess also going to disable the animation here. If I do that, then okay, I have some rotation here. Also disabling that. Only the draw function should be there. So now the origin rotation is applied to the triangle, right? This 45 degree. I don't need that right now. And I have this scaling. I would like to have a larger triangle. So I'm going to change it back to 1, the original size of the triangle. Then I'm going to translate it back to the center. These are not requirements. I just want to have a better view. That's why I have it here. So let me zoom in a bit. This is good. And bring up the console so that I can see what is going to happen to this triangle. Okay. So now we want to add texture. So what is happening now in the triangle is, let me open the triangle geometry here. So this is the class for the triangle, right? We define the triangle. So these are the points or the vertices, and these are the color. So we have 3 different colors on 3 corners of the triangle. That's why I have this interpolated color on the triangle, right? So the texture is going to be the same, except now we're going to use an image for the texture. Okay. All right. So the first thing is going to be, let's call the outline decided. We're going to update the shader to sample color from texture using the coordinate system. So we are going to add that to our code. So let's start by doing that. So this was our shader. This was the color sent from the class from here, and the shader is doing the interpolation, right? So let me add one extra variable here. Instead of the color, now we're going to use UV coordinate system. So I'll explain that a bit more here, but first let me add the variables. So I'm going to add a new variable which is going to be another attribute UV, and UV is going to come from the 2D texture, right? So this is going to be a vec2, and then we need to pass that to the fragment shader, because we know the fragment shader deals with the color. But first, the value should come through the vertex shader. That's why you have this attribute variable here. But we are going to add a varying variable to transfer this to the fragment shader. So here goes the varying variable vec2, and I can call this UV. So we have this attribute UV with this varying variable, right? Similar to this V color, A color, we are just going to assign that here. So V color is going to be UV, A color is going to be AUV. So we can replace this. We are not going to, this is not going to be needed anymore, but I'm just leaving it for debugging purpose, since we may want to have multiple objects, with one with texture, one with just color. But let's leave it here just for now. If I delete that, there is no problem, because we're not going to use it anymore. But for now, I'm just going to leave it here. Okay. So since now we have this new attribute, we need to change the CPU side code to match that, right? So what we are going to do here, we had this A position and A color. Now we have this UV coordinate system from a texture. So I'm going to add that here, and then we'll make changes here later. But first thing first, let's match the variables we have in the shader. So this is UV, and this is going to be UV. The same variable is going to be used for the variable here and here, and this is going to be a 2D variable, right? Okay, so how this is going to work? We have only these 3D data points in the class, right? We don't have anything for the UV coordinates from the texture. Okay. So let me explain this first, then we will go ahead and try to load the texture. Let me refresh the code to see everything is working. Okay, so there is one more thing. This is something I learned from experience. So we are going to run the code from server eventually, but okay, let's talk about that later. So first thing is, we are going to need a texture, right? We had a geometry, we are going to need a texture. So I'm going to create a new folder, and I'm going to name it texture, which is going to save the images, the ones we're going to use. So let's download something from the web. So what kind of texture I can apply here? Maybe I can make this a brick wall, right? So let me see if I can set up some pattern. So I can use one of those. I'm going to select a square one, because I'll tell you the reason soon. Maybe which one? This one looks good. Size is too large. Not square. Well, it doesn't matter, right? We can use any of this. Maybe this one. Yeah, this one is 15 by 15. So I'm going to save this image. in the place where I have my texture set. So let me save this texture here. This is a JPG image, so I'm saving it here. Then I need to resize that. I need to make this smaller, give it a better name, right? So let me call it block. Then I'm going to use a simple image editor to resize that. Okay. Because this is too large, my object is much smaller. I'm going to make it 512 by 512. Okay. Okay, so let me explain how the UV coordinate system works. So this is our triangle, right? And we want to apply the texture on top of the triangle. So how it is going to work? So if I open the texture here, this is my texture. Let me keep it side by side so that I can explain what is happening. Let me grab my annotation tool. So how did I draw the triangle? I had these three corners of the triangle. I supplied them in the class, and then the class was supplying that vertices to the shader. The shader was drawing the triangle, right? So what I want to do, I want to add the corners of the texture, this image, to the triangle, and the shader will do the interpolation from this image. So what I want to do, I want to add this UV coordinate here, right? So for example, in this triangle, if I consider this, let's say this is one, the object is an unit object, right? And this is the center. So this is going to be, so if this is center, this would be, let's say, so this is -1, or we can start from here. So this can be, this is transparent, but let me try. So this can be 0, 1, and this is not 0, 1. So this is 0, 0. This is going to be 0, 1. So this is our UV coordinate system, right? So 0, 1. This is the ground, and we have the same system here in the texture. So this is our 0, 0, and this is 0, 1. So matching this bottom, it is going to be easy, right? So what we want is, we want to have this texture, we want to sample the texture for the triangle, right? So if I draw a triangle here, let me grab a straight line. So this would be more like a triangle. So our triangle should look like this. So we need to make sure that the top vertex should get the value of this location. So how do we detect that location, or how do we calculate that location? So this is our 0, 1, and this is our 1, 1. I hope this is obvious, right? Because the UV, so all these values, they're in UV format. So to be more specific, this is our UV. Same goes for here, right? For all the values. So what is the UV value of this corner? we need to match that. So this is a simple interpolation, right? So in between 0 to 1, so the value of y is going to be the same. The value of x is going to be 0.5. So this is in between this 0 and 1, right? So this is 0.5. So the value of this is going to be 0.5 and then 1, right? So this is our UV coordinate values that for this one we can simply calculate. For more complex object, this is going to be a little bit more complex, but at least for the triangle or for the cube or for a square, this is pretty straightforward. So as you can see, for the cube, if we want to apply the same texture on the multiple faces, we just supply these values, right? And for the triangle, this is how we do that. For a square, this texture is already a square, so we can put the exact same texture on the square, on the top of the square. Okay, so now I'm going to assign these values. Let me clear the canvas. And okay, so I'm going to close the texture and I'm going to work on adding the value. So we need to add the UV value now, because as you can see from the pattern, we had these positions, these colors, and then the UV values. So we need component for all these three things. So the first three values, they're positions, next three, they're colors, and the next they're the UV. So we need the UVs here. So we can have some sort of parameter passing system for the UVs, which you can implement for the class. But I'm not going to do that since I already calculated the values from here. I know what I want to put here, right? So what is the topmost? So this is our bottom left, right? So if we remember the value from the bottom left, that was 0.0, right? So the bottom left is 0.0. Then the bottom right is 0.1, and the top point is something we calculated using the middle point. So I'm just going to replace it. That calculated 0.0. Actually, this is 1.0. And this is the top point which we calculated. So this is 1, and this was 0.5. Right. So now we have these 8 values per data point. So the first three elements, their positions. The next 3 elements, okay, let me so now we have total 8 elements, right? Okay, let me just add one more comment line here. So next 2 elements, they are the UV or texture coordinates. So texture coordinates, and we are calling them UV. I hope this simplifies the understanding of each of the data points. Now we need to reflect the change here. So what are the changes? This is our UV points. We need to change this as well. So this is 3D data, position 3D color, and 2D UV. So we have total 3 plus 3 is 6 plus 2 8. So originally you had 6 data points. Now we have 8 data points, right? And so starting from 0 is the location, then starting from 3 is the color, then starting from 6 to 8 is the texture, right? Okay, so this is done. Now we are good with the attributes, the attribute variables, right? Okay, now we need to use this in the shader. How do we do that? So that is the, let's go back to our topic. That is how to sample the color from the texture to the UV coordinate system. So I have the UVs now to the vertex shader, and I am assigning that to the varying variable, and I need the exact, just like the color, I need the exact same copy in the fragment shader. That is exactly what I'm going to use for sampling from the texture. So WebGL has its own sampling function that is an uniform variable. We call it uniform. This type of variable is called sampler. Sampler 2D. Since this is an uniform variable, you can call it uSampler, or you can give another name, but this is fine. So this sampler is in fact going to be the texture, where we're going to use this coordinate to sample from this texture. Right? Okay, so instead of the color, so far everything is, nothing changed. Still it is in the color, but now we are going to make the change here, and instead of using this color, we are going to use the texture. Okay, so there is another function to be used in the shader that is called texture 2D. Okay, and that function can use the sampler or the texture and sample the color using the UV coordinate system, right? So this is all we needed to calculate the color. We need the texture, which is the uSampler. We need the location of the vertices, and rest of the task is done by the fragment shader. So I think, let me refresh it. We'll not see anything. Now it is black because we don't have any texture. We have to add the texture from the, or we have to supply the texture from the JavaScript side. But at least we are done with this part.